Gerry Duggan finally reveals the big bad of the new series and connects it up wonderfully to everything he's been doing over in the world of X-Men, giving Tony Stark a new enemy in that of Fei Long, the man who's been trying to take Mars from the mutants. Duggan also put in the work to tie Fei Long's obsession with Mars and Iron Man all the way back to Hickman's era of Avengers, setting up a past history between the two men. I did not expect the big battle we got this issue between the two of them, since in the previous issues Duggan has been doing a great job at this sort of cat and mouse game between Tony and Fei Long, and I really enjoyed that when it finally came to blows, Tony wiped the floor with the man, and Duggan riding Tony as a man who has had this happen countless times to him in the past, and he's just so sick and tired of people trying to take the things he owns is great, and it gives Tony this almost careless attitude, like, oh, this is just another billionaire industrialist trying to take all his stuff, and it's one that, if the past is to be believed, will come back to bite him on the ass as it's done many times before. Such a cool way to portray Tony's arrogance in a new light. Juan Frigeri continues his fantastically physical artwork, treating us to some really cool action sequences and really creative ones at that, like Tony using things that are on the street like fire hydrants and parking meters to battle the villain, and even at one point a spirit bomb like attack, which is really quite cool. Juan also handled the geography of the fight really well, employing familiar New York landmarks to signpost where we are and where we are going in the fight. The Invincible Iron Man issue 4 finally revealed the big bad of the series, ditching the cat and mouse games and delivering a cool action set piece that wonderfully showed how much Tony has grown as a character over the last couple of years, but also how much he hasn't. I'm going to give this issue a 10 out of 10. The Invincible Iron Man issue 4 finds Fei Long remembering the time the Avengers fought Ex Nihilo on Mars, and how they and Tony Stark could have easily claimed the world for themselves, but they let it waste away on the vine and the mutants stole it from humanity. He blames Stark and the Avengers for snatching his life's work away from him, and him having to defuel his rockets and return them to storage was the worst day of his life. But today will be the best day, as he has become the antidote to the post-human fascism they find themselves living in. Tony meanwhile tries to continue to write his autobiography, finding it hard to keep on looking to his past, especially since between his parents dying, taking shrapnel to the heart, or discovering that most of his tech has made his villains, he has had many worse days of his life. He figures that today is going to be a big contender as he heads to the New York Stock Exchange, knowing that the new villain he is fighting told him to come out swinging at the bell. At the Stock Exchange, Fei Long announces that he and Orchis are purchasing Stark Unlimited, planning on using it to forward humanity's interests. He spots Tony in the crowd, glad that Tony got his message since today is going to be fun. Tony tells the villain that Zhong Wei and his neighbors will be avenged, but Fei begins his celebrations by opening the stock exchange, giving interviews about how he was always admired Stark companies and it's his responsibility to grab the reins and restore them to glory when Tony won't. He admits that he didn't make his presence known until now since he didn't want to drive the stock price up, but if Tony wanted to stop him from helping the company, he's here and he can do so. Tony tells the man that only the bravest try hostile takeovers of Stark companies, listing off how Obadiah Stane, Justin Hammer, and Justine Hammer have all tried, and they are all dead because of it, and it even killed Tony once. A broker thinks that they should fight for the pink sheets, but Fei knows that Stark would never stand a chance against him. Tony asks the man to step outside, unless he's scared, that is. As they head outside, Tony realizes to himself that he doesn't really know a lot about the man, besides what he read on his Wikipedia entry, as Fei tells him not to obsess over losing his company, since that happens to old people. Tony suits up, telling Fei to make restitution or prepare for war. He asks why he even wants Stark Unlimited, and Fei thinks he wants to make it great again, and why does Tony care, since he walked away from the company. Tony thinks the X-Men's island was too tough for him to battle, so he thought he would switch lanes. Fei bursts out laughing, assuring Tony that the mutants will be dealt with in time. Tony begins to find Fei is a bit overconfident, and maybe since he talks a lot about abandonment, he has daddy issues. Tony probes in on that, telling Fei that at least he knows where his old man is. Fei immediately attacks Tony in a blinding rage, firing a massive laser beam from his mouth. Fei isn't happy that Tony made him tip his hand, so he tells the gathering people that he just used a state-of-the-art armor to defend himself. Tony doesn't like being used as some sort of PR stunt, blasting the villain, but he absorbs it, wondering if that's the best Tony can do. Tony knows it's far from it, firing a laser at a water hydrant, blasting Faye with a torrent of water. Tony tells Faye that he is a very smart man, but he fails to see how angry he has made the hero by killing innocents and his friends. Iron Man comes at Faye with a parking meter as the villain tries to goad Tony by talking about how he was abandoned by his parents when they died, but he cast his own parents out since they were holding him back, and Tony needs to accept his offer to fight for his humanity and legacy, and he can earn his company back through that, and they can even set it up so it looked like Tony best Faye Long. Tony decides that he wants to stress test Faye's supposed armor and shielding, smashing the man with a meter and sending him flying. Tony races after him, preventing the villain from hitting a moving school bus, as he knows that Faye is getting this far into his life and business, and that's a problem, since while dealing with frost giants and celestials, he's had his head in the clouds. Faye is thrown back into Wall Street, where Tony opens fire on the man, assuring the watchers on that the weapons he is using are non-lethal. Tony activates a giant energy ball, wanting to wrap this up quickly. He unleashes the energy wave, which resets every electronic device inside its radius, allowing Tony to deliver his terms to Faye Long in private. Tony grabs the villain, understanding that his heart was broken when the mutants stole Mars from him, and Faye is mad at him under some delusion that he owned Mars before the mutants, but he won't let him use his creations to hurt anyone, and even Stain and Hammer knew enough to not hurt his friends or family and leave them out of the business. Faye struggles to ask what Tony is trying to accomplish, so the hero tells him that he is trying to save lives, and now he is trying to save the villains, demanding that he walk to the nearest police precinct and confess to blowing up his brownstone, killing his neighbors, and Zhong Wei. Faye has his own counter offer, throwing a punch at Tony, but he grabs his hand, crushing and breaking the villain's arm. Tony hopes the man can avoid orthopedic surgery, but he hears that Stark Unlimited has a great healthcare plan, and he should know, since he trusted Zhong Wei to institute it. Tony leaves, and Faye begins laughing, finding himself to have finally found a worthy nemesis. Later on, Jennifer Walters tries to call Tony, telling his voicemail that she just got the court documents regarding the sale of Stark Unlimited, and while she may be enough to help out here, Tony might want to consider contacting some intellectual property lawyers since Faye is coming for his armor. Tony meanwhile finds himself desperately wanting a drink, but he knows that if he can never get to an AA meeting, he heads into the edge of space, turning off his thrusters so he can hear only his heartbeat and listen to the proof that he is alive. After a moment, Tony calms himself and heads back to work, heading for Krakoa, where he meets with Emma Frost, asking her if the enemy of his enemy is his friend.